the morning my sister announced her pregnancy. She did it in our company atrium with cupcakes and a photographer. She said the baby's father was my husband. My parents stood behind her, beaming, and told me to be the bigger person and fund her maternity leave. What they didn't know was that I run ethics and risk at Hearthline Nutrition. I had already labeled them all high exposure. My name is Avery Lane. I am 33 years old, and I am the Director of Ethics and Risk for Hearthline Nutrition. On this particular Monday morning, I was violating my own core principle. I was exposed. I stood on the third-floor cantilevered glass walkway, overlooking the atrium. Below me, our Employee Families Day was in full swing. Hearthline HQ, a 20-story monument to bioengineered wellness in West Haven, prided itself on transparency. The atrium was its heart, all glass, brushed steel, and towering fiddle-leaf figs that were probably fed our own nutrient supplements. The air hummed with forced congeniality, and the sharp acidic smell of boutique coffee from the subsidized cafe. Families Day was a PR initiative, a way to humanize our Q3 projections. It meant toddlers with sticky fingers running them on $10,000 ergonomic chairs and spouses making awkward small talk about market verticals. As head of risk, I hated it. It was an uncontrolled variable. Too many non-disclosure agreements mingling with unsecured personal devices. I was observing, my tablet in hand, not participating. My vantage point was perfect. I could see the main entrance, the elevator banks, and the temporary stage set up for the CEO's impending work-life balance speech. I preferred the altitude. It kept the noise muffled and the emotions theoretical. Then I saw her, my sister, Sloane Lane. She hadn't entered like a guest, signing in at the digital security desk. She had emerged from the executive corridor, which was odd. Her guest pass wouldn't grant that level of access. She wasn't carrying a purse. She was carrying a bakery box, pastel pink, tied with a meticulous satin bow. Beside her, a man I recognized from the West Haven Gazette angled a professional camera, his press badge glinting. Sloane glided into the center of the atrium, right onto the corporate logo inlaid in the marble, the precise spot where the acoustic baffling was designed to carry sound. She placed the box on the main reception kiosk, a slab of imported Italian stone. She looked radiant. That was her signature talent. Radiance. She glowed with the easy, unearned confidence of someone whose mistakes had always been cushioned by others. Specifically, by me. She opened the box, dozens of cupcakes, each frosted in pale blue and baby pink, were nestled inside, and in her other hand, she held it up, pinching it between two fingers as if presenting a winning lottery ticket, a monochrome, flimsy square of thermal paper, an ultrasound photograph. The atrium chatter, which had been a steady, manageable 60 decibels, dipped. People love a spectacle, especially one that doesn't involve spreadsheets. And then I saw my husband, Carter Hale, Associate Director of Growth. He stepped out from behind a structural pillar, moving to stand beside Sloane. His posture was wrong. Carter, usually the embodiment of aspirational confidence, shoulders back, tailored suit, 1,000-watt smile, was compressed. He looked like a man bracing for an internal audit he knew he would fail. He stared fixedly at the cupcakes, his hands jammed deep into the pockets of his slacks. He did not look up. He absolutely, pointedly, did not look up to the third-floor balcony where he knew I always stood during these vulnerable, open-door events. The final pieces of the ambush clicked into place. My parents, Mark and Judith Lane, materialized from the crowd. They flanked Sloane, creating a perfect, supportive tableau. Judith, my mother, reached out and smoothed Sloane's artfully messy hair, her eyes bright with performative tears. Mark, my father, placed a proprietary hand on Sloane's shoulder. They weren't just attending, they were endorsing. Sloane waited for the silence to deepen, for enough phones to be raised. We have such wonderful news. Sloane's voice was high, trembling with manufactured joy. She held up the ultrasound photo higher. We're starting our own little family. A smattering of polite, deeply confused applause rippled through the analysts and middle managers. Then, my mother, Judith, stepped forward into the spotlight Sloane had created. "We are just so proud of her, and of Carter, of course." She beamed at my husband, whose face had gone a chalky white. "It's a true blessing." The applause died instantly. The air turned sharp, crystalline. I could feel the fractional shift, the biometric change in the room, as dozens of heads, my colleagues, my subordinates, my bosses, swiveled from the display below and angled up towards me. I was no longer an observer. I was the counterparty. My father clapped Carter on the back, a gesture of male solidarity that looked painful. "Family is family, after all," Mark announced to the room, a proclamation that sounded suspiciously like a legal defense. "Blood is thicker than, well, you know." Sloane let the tension stretch. She looked directly up at me then, a wide, innocent smile plastered on her face, the smile of a child who has just pushed a priceless vase off a shelf and knows, with absolute certainty, that she will not be the one blamed for it. "Avery," she called out, her voice echoing off the reinforced glass. "Isn't it wonderful?" I remained still. I didn't lean on the railing. I didn't cross my arms. In my line of work, the first person to flinch loses. My mother took the cue. "Avery, darling," she said, projecting for the benefit of the entire growth department gathered by the espresso machine. "We were just talking about the logistics. It's all so sudden. Sloane is going to need support. This is a high-risk pregnancy, you know." Everything Sloane does is high risk, I thought, my gaze flat. "And Carter needs to focus on his expanding role here, supporting the company," my mother continued, blissfully oblivious to the corporate jargon she was mangling. "So, we all agreed, it's the only practical solution." She looked at my father, who nodded gravely, a mask of paternal concern. She looked at Carter, who was now studying his Italian leather shoelaces as if they held the secrets to Q4 projections. She looked back at me, her face hardening into a look of righteous demand. "Avery, you're going to help Sloane with her maternity leave, and of course, you'll cover her rent for the next 6 months, just until she and the baby get settled." It wasn't a request. It was a public declaration of terms, a hostile takeover announced in the company lobby. They were demanding I finance my own humiliation. They weren't just asking for money. They were asking for my public capitulation. They wanted me to pay for the severance package of my own marriage. The audacity of it was breathtaking. It was a tactical masterpiece of emotional terrorism, and my family, I had to admit, were seasoned practitioners. I analyzed the components, the public setting, the presence of senior management, the appeal to family values in a corporate environment that championed them in its branding, and then the photographer. He wasn't just taking candid shots of the event, he was focused. His lens was aimed at me, then at Sloane, then back at me, capturing the dynamic. I recognized him now. Ben Karras. He was a stringer for the West Haven Gazette's local business and society page. He wouldn't be here for free cupcakes and lukewarm coffee. An internal source. My mother's words echoed. This wasn't just an ambush. It was a press release. They hadn't just planned to humiliate me. They'd planned to document it, to create a public record of my coldness if I refused, or my submission if I agreed. They were attempting to leverage my professional standing against me, refuse to help my pregnant sister, whose baby was fathered by my own husband. How would that look for the director of ethics? I felt the blood drain from my face, a cold, internal vacuum. But I knew, objectively, it wouldn't show. I have practiced boardroom composure in the face of billion-dollar compliance failures. This was just a personal one. I let the silence sit for 3 full seconds, long enough to be deliberate. I smiled. Not a warm smile, a corporate one, the one I used just before I informed a vendor their contract was being terminated for material fraud. "Congratulations," I said. My voice was calm, measured, carrying easily across the atrium. I directed the word to the group, a neutral acknowledgement of a stated fact. I looked at Sloan. I looked at Carter. I looked at my parents. Then, I lifted my left hand, the one wearing my smartwatch. My thumb found the bevel. I pressed it twice. A sharp, distinct click, click. It was a custom macro I'd designed. It didn't just tell time, it sent an immediate, prioritized signal to the Hearthline security mainframe. It isolated the previous 5 minutes of footage from every camera in the atrium, all 12 high-definition angles, and flagged the next 10 minutes. It created a new case file, labeled Atrium Event Timestamp, and firewalled it, locking the raw footage in a secure, encrypted server partition where it could not be deleted or overwritten by standard retention policies. It was a function I'd built for whistleblower protection and immediate incident capture. I had just officially timestamped my own erasure, and in doing so, I had just signed the writ for their removal. They thought I was waving, or perhaps checking a message. They didn't know I was collecting evidence. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw my colleagues. The whispers were immediate. This was better than a sexual harassment seminar. This was real. I saw analysts from my own team looking mortified, their faces reflecting my own humiliation. People from Carter's team looked predatory. They smelled a power vacuum. The senior executives were worse. Our CFO, David Petrov, who was standing near the stage, suddenly became fascinated by the architecture of the ceiling. Our head of HR, Maria Sanchez, pretended to take an urgent call. Her face pale. They were practicing strategic neutrality. They wouldn't intervene. This was a family matter, toxic and radioactive, and they would stay upwind until the fallout settled. They would side with whoever was left standing. I realized, completely and utterly alone, and that, at least, was familiar territory. "Avery, did you hear me?" my mother called up again, her voice hardening, the faux sympathy gone. "The rent, Avery, we need to know you'll do the right thing." I smiled that same thin laminated smile. "We'll have to discuss the compliance of that request later." "Judith," I said, using her first name. The shift was subtle, but I saw her flinch. I had just moved her from mother to external party. I turned, not abruptly but decisively. I did not run. I did not storm off. I simply exited the operational theater. I walked the length of the glass bridge, my heels clicking a steady, unhurried rhythm on the thick paneling. Each step was measured. I could feel every eye on my back. They were expecting tears, a slammed door, a shout. I gave them nothing. I was a redacted document. I reached the executive elevator bank, the one requiring a level 4 security fob. I pressed the call button. The doors opened instantly, a silent, waiting mouth. I stepped inside the brushed steel cabin. The doors slid shut, sealing me in blessed, sterile silence. The smell of leather and ozone was a chemical comfort. I didn't press the button for my office on the 19th floor. I didn't press the button for the garage. I pressed B4, the basement, the archives. My family, my husband, the reporter, they were all still up in the atrium, basking in the bright, superficial light. They were celebrating their victory, already dividing the spoils of my surrender. They didn't know the real work, the work that mattered, always happens in the dark. The elevator hummed, beginning its long, silent descent. They had just staged a public execution. What they didn't realize is that I wasn't the victim. I was the auditor. And down in the cold, climate-controlled darkness of B4, the server logs were waiting. The digital receipts for their betrayal were already spooling, and I was on my way to collect them. The elevator doors opened on B4 with a soft, pneumatic hiss. The air that greeted me was 17 degrees cooler than the atrium, sterile and smelling of archival paper and ozone from the servers. This was my territory. The archives were not a basement. They were the company's memory. A climate-controlled vault holding every email, every keycard swipe, every digital footprint ever left within Hearthline's walls. Upstairs, in the light, my family was operating on their preferred currency: emotion, guilt, and public shame. Down here, I dealt in mine: data, facts, and immutable records. My family, I thought as I keyed my credentials into the high-security terminal, has always priced me by my account balance. They just never liked it when I audited theirs. I remembered the summer I was 16. I was working double shifts at a diner in West Haven, the smell of grease and burnt coffee clinging to my hair. My hands were perpetually raw from industrial dish soap. I was saving for college, stacking every $5 tip into a savings account that I guarded like a state secret. That same summer, Sloane, then 14, was given a supplementary black card by our parents. For her creativity, my mother Judith explained. You can't put a budget on inspiration, Avery. Sloane's inspiration that summer included a spontaneous trip to New York to absorb the gallery scene, a collection of vintage Japanese denim, and a short-lived attempt at becoming a handbag designer that resulted in 3 unusable prototypes and $20,000 in wasted leather. I wore a polyester uniform with my name, Avery, badly stitched on the pocket. Sloane wore cashmere wraps for the studio, which was just her bedroom with a new coat of paint. I paid for my own SAT prep courses. Sloane got a tutor for watercolor painting. I memorized financial aid formulas. Sloane memorized the seasonal palettes of designers. When I won the state scholarship that covered my undergraduate tuition, my parents were relieved. See, my father, Mark, said, clapping me on the shoulder, that practicality of yours, it always pays off. He didn't mention that it paid off for them. 2 years later, when I was a sophomore drowning in organic chemistry, they sat me down at the same kitchen table where I'd once balanced my meager tips. Sloane, they explained, had an incredible opportunity, a vision. She was launching an art collective, a startup that would blend immersive experiences with sustainable crafts. It was, my mother insisted, the future. There was just one problem: the seed money. The venture capitalists she'd charmed had pulled out. But we found a solution, my father said, his voice full of false heartiness. We're liquidating the old college fund. What college fund? I asked, my blood turning to ice. I knew exactly what college fund. It was the one my grandparents had left me, the one I hadn't touched, saving it for law school. Avery, don't be so selfish, my mother chided, her brow furrowing. Sloane needs this now. Your scholarship covers your basics. This is her entire future. It's my future, too, I'd whispered. It's my money. It's family money, my father corrected, his tone hardening. And right now, the family needs to support Sloane. She's the artist. You're the pragmatist. You'll figure it out. You always do. They sold my portfolio of municipal bonds, the one secure thing I thought I owned, to fund a warehouse space in the arts district that Sloane abandoned 6 months later when she discovered she preferred the idea of being an artist to the work of it. The startup dissolved. The money vanished. My parents declared it a valuable learning experience for her. For me, it was a different lesson. My assets were merely collateral for my sister's whims. I never went to law school. I took a corporate track, got my MBA at night, paid for it myself by working as a paralegal, and found my true calling not in practicing law, but in enforcing it. I clawed my way into the compliance department of a mid-level bank, then got headhunted by Hearthline Nutrition. I chose ethics and risk precisely because my family had none. I built a career on quantifying the cost of bad behavior. I became an expert in the very thing my parents and sister considered an inconvenience: accountability. The terminal beeped, granting me access. I pulled up the first file. Atrium event timestamp. The footage was already there, locked and clean. I had been so meticulous in building my life, in walling off my professional self from the financial sinkhole of my family. And then I met Carter Hale. Carter was, I believed, my one successful outlier. He joined Hearthline's growth division 2 years after me. He was everything my family wasn't: calm, predictable, structured. He spoke in terms of 5-year plans and market projections. He seemed to admire my discipline. He called my focus brilliant, not cold. He was a promise of peace, a partner who understood that balance sheets had to, in fact, balance. He was my safe harbor. Or he was my greatest miscalculation. The shift was subtle. It began about a year ago. After his promotion to associate director, he started spending more time with the PR and marketing teams. He loved being quoted in our internal newsletter. He loved being on stage at the quarterly town halls. He started using words like synergy and optics in our private conversations. He became less interested in the hard data and more interested in the story the data told. He had started, I realized, to stand next to the camera. He also started to spend more time with my family. He found Sloan refreshing and full of life. He laughed at my father's jokes. He told my mother her manipulative guilt trips were just charming maternal concern. He began to see Sloan as the light, and me, once again, as the practical one, the one who managed the infrastructure of our lives while he and Sloan discussed big ideas. When we got married, Avery Lane, director of risk, drafted our prenuptial agreement. Carter had laughed, calling it unromantic. "It's just a contingency plan, Carter," I told him, my pen steady. "Every successful enterprise has one." My personal lawyer, a shark named Alara, had raised an eyebrow. "You're tying his payout to his employment?" "Specifically, to his unvested stock options," I clarified. "And I want a loyalty clause, a material breach of fidelity." "You mean cheating," Alara said, blunt as a gavel. "I mean a demonstrated failure of fiduciary duty to our partnership," I replied. "If he materially breaches the trust, his claim to any asset acquired during the marriage, including appreciation on our home and all his unvested Hearthline equity, is nullified. He leaves with his salary and his pension contributions, nothing else." "This is brutal, Avery," Alara had said, a small smile on her face. "He'll never sign it." "He'll sign it," I said. "He thinks it's a theoretical exercise. He thinks he's a good man." And he did sign it. He signed it because he was in love with the idea of me, the powerful executive, the stable earner, and he never, not for 1 second, read the fine print. He never believed there would be an audit. The file server was now cross-referencing my tagged security footage with access logs. The data stream was populating. "Sisters share." That was my mother's mantra, ever since we were children, when I got a doll for my birthday. Sisters share meant Sloan got to play with it, which meant Sloan got to break its head off. When I got my first paycheck, sisters share meant I was expected to loan her $50 that was never repaid. Over the years, the definition simply scaled. My car, my condo before Carter moved in, my professional connections. Sisters share was the Lane family's private, predatory version of wealth redistribution, flowing in one direction only, from my ledger to hers. Today, in the atrium, they had tried to execute the largest transfer yet. They had tried to make me share my husband, my salary, and my dignity. They had priced my public humiliation at 6 months of Sloan's rent and a blank check for her maternity leave. I sat back in the ergonomic chair, the cold of the server room seeping into my skin. I am not a creature of public apologies or messy, tearful confrontations. I don't believe in them. They are inefficient, a waste of emotional capital. Yelling is a confession of powerlessness. Tears are a failure of strategy. I believe in documents. I believe in metadata. I believe in email chains, server logs, financial statements, and high-definition video footage with embedded, immutable timestamps. My family had gathered in the atrium, trembling with their manufactured outrage and their righteous, greedy demands. They were all emotion, all noise, all chaotic, unsecured risk. I was down in B4 watching the quiet, orderly procession of facts lining up on my screen. I believe in documents. And documents, unlike people, do not know how to tremble. They do not get scared. They do not lie. They just wait. The human brain is wired for narrative, for emotion. Mine is wired for systems. My family had just executed a sloppy, emotional, high-risk maneuver. I, in the silent cold of B4, was simply initiating a standard review of anomalous events. First, the physical access logs. They thought the atrium was the stage. But the true stage is the network. Every door at Hearthline is a data point. I filtered for Carter Hale's office, 19th floor, cross-referencing all guest pass access against his employee ID for the past 90 days. It took less than 4 seconds. File: SIS access log, ID 9004 guest, S, Lane. Correlate, E8812, C, Hale. Event: access granted. Location: 19 exec growth. Door: 19 to 112. C, Hale, office. Timestamp: 234201. Tuesday, 2 months ago. Event: exit. Location: 19 exec growth. Door: 19112. Timestamp: 1:17:44, Wednesday. 1 hour and 35 minutes. Sloan, using a guest pass authorized by Carter, had entered his locked office long after the cleaning crews had gone, long after the last analyst had run their final numbers. The date stuck out. It was the night after our Q2 earnings call. A high-stress day. I had been in the D.C. office for a final review with our federal lobbyists. Carter had told me he was pulling an all-nighter at his desk. He wasn't. It seemed entirely inaccurate. This was a procedural violation. A guest pass is for escort during business hours. Granting unsupervised, late-night access to a non-employee in an executive-level office was, at minimum, a serious security breach. At worst, it was the beginning of a timeline. I tagged the log file, Exhibit A. Next, the ethics hotline. My department manages it. It's an encrypted, anonymous portal for employees to report concerns. I am one of 3 administrators with key pair access to the inbox. We get, on average, 20 tips a week. Everything from time card fraud to supplier kickbacks. Most are noise. Some are bombs. I filtered the inbox for keywords. Carter Hale. Sloan Lane. Growth. A single entry popped up. Received 3 weeks ago. Subject: inappropriate relationship. Growth division. Body: you should look into Carter Hale. He's sleeping with his sister-in-law. Not very ethical for a company that sells family wellness. He's also reckless. Check his corporate card expenses. Attachment: 1-point PDF. The attachment was a scanned PDF, a hotel folio, not an invoice, but the final, itemized bill left under the door. Hotel: North Shore Inn. Guest: C. Hale Room, 308. Harborview Suite. Charges: room service: 1 bottle Veuve Clicquot, 1 oysters, 1 truffle fries. Mini bar, PPV movie. Payment: Amex, XXX02. C. Hale. The date on the folio was from 2.5 months ago. The North Shore Inn was a $30 Uber ride from headquarters, a boutique hotel known for its discretion and its thick walls. The American Express card number was his corporate T&E card. I knew this because I had signed off on his higher credit limit last year. Sleeping with his sister-in-law was a personal matter, a devastating, predictable, and frankly, pathetic one. But paying for the rendezvous with a corporate card? That was expense fraud. That was my jurisdiction. I tagged the email and the PDF, Exhibit B. Now for the financing. The performance in the atrium was polished. The cupcakes, the photographer, the coordinated arrival, that required funding. Sloan lived on credit card fumes and parental handouts. Carter was equity rich but cash poor, pouring most of his salary into the mortgage on our oversized house. The $25,000 figure was a hypothesis based on the cost of a high-end local PR stringer and 6 months' rent on a decent apartment. I didn't need to hack my parents' accounts. I am, as my father always said, a pragmatist. I keep records. 6 months ago, my mother had cornered me at a rare family dinner, attempting to get me to co-sign a bridge loan for another of Sloan's ephemeral projects. I'd refused, to prove their solvency. My mother had angrily emailed me a copy of their latest joint brokerage statement from their wealth advisor. She'd meant to intimidate me with their holdings. Instead, she'd given me a baseline. I keep everything. I pulled the email from my personal archive. File. FDUD Our Portfolio Judith Lane. EML. Then, I accessed our corporate visitor log and cross-referenced the photographer's press badge. Ben Karras. I ran a quick search on Karras's Media LLC, found his standard retainer fees. The $25,000 estimate felt accurate. I couldn't prove the transfer from this alone, but the anonymous tipster had given me a new keyword. Bluebird? It felt random, until I cross-referenced it with Sloane's myriad of failed businesses. Her art collective, the one funded by my stolen college fund, had been called Bluebird Artisans. It was her digital signature, the handle she used for everything. I pivoted from the access logs to the communications archive. Hearthline, like most post-Sarbanes-Oxley companies, backs up everything. We retain all internal communications for 7 years, including deleted messages, in an offline backup server for litigation hold purposes. Accessing it requires dual authorization from legal and my own department. I was my own department. I authorized it. I initiated a query, a full data restoration from the disaster backup server for all Slack messages authored by C.F. Hale and all messages sent to or from the external handle Bluebird, Sloane's personal account, which she had foolishly linked to her guest pass registration. The server hummed. This was a heavier lift. While it populated, I pulled the corporate governance policies. Hearthline Policy 4.01. Conflict of interest. Employees must avoid any relationship, investment, or association that interferes, or appears to interfere, with the independent exercise of judgment in the company's best interest. This includes, but is not limited to, romantic or sexual relationships between a superior and a subordinate, or between any employee and an external party where such a relationship could create a conflict. Hearthline Policy 4.02c. Performance Reviews and Compensation. No employee may participate in any review, panel, or decision-making process concerning the compensation, promotion, or project approval of any party with whom they have a personal, familial, or romantic relationship. Failure to disclose such a relationship is a material breach of conduct and grounds for immediate termination. I froze. I hadn't even been looking for that. I was focused on the expense fraud, but the policy wording struck me. Project approval. I opened my own calendar. I went back 1 month. Event. Q3 Project Review. Avery Lane. Project Omega. Panelists: David Petrov, CFO, Maria Sanchez, HR, Carter Hale, Growth. Carter. He had sat on my panel. Project Omega was my flagship initiative, a complete overhaul of our supply chain ethics verification system. It was my bid for a VP title. Carter had been the most vocal critic. He'd argued my projections were too conservative, that the compliance burden was stifling growth. He'd almost succeeded in having it tabled. He wasn't just my husband. He wasn't just Sloane's lover. He was a professional saboteur, actively working to undermine my career from within a governance panel he was explicitly forbidden, by policy, from sitting on. His affair wasn't just a personal betrayal, it was a corporate one. He had breached his fiduciary duty to the company by sitting in that room, and he had breached it again by trying to kill a critical compliance project. This was no longer a family drama. This was a coup. The Slack query beeped, complete. The restored messages spooled onto my screen, a litany of deleted conversations. Bluebird, Sloane. She's in D.C. You're sure? C. Hale, Carter. Positive. Her flight landed at 8. She's with the lobbyists all night. I'm at the office. 11:30 p.m. Use the side entrance. My guest pass is at the desk. Bluebird. This is so hot. Sneaking around. C. Hale. It's complicated. But yes. Hurry. I scrolled down. Weeks and weeks of this. Assignations. Complaints about me. My coldness. My obsession with work. And then, I found the one I needed. The day after the anonymous ethics tip was filed. C. Hale. Someone fucking knows. An anonymous tip just came in. Bluebird. What? Who? C. Hale. I don't know. It won't tell me, but I think it's from her department. She's trying to fire me. Bluebird. She can't do that. We haven't done anything wrong. Hale. Sleeping with my wife's sister isn't wrong? And on the company card? Jesus. Sloan, I need to get ahead of this. We need a new narrative. One where we are the victims. Bluebird. What narrative? C. Hale. The one we talked about. The baby, the family, the support. We have to make her the villain. Publicly. We go to your parents. We make it a family matter. We'll force her hand. Bluebird. You mean, we do it? Now? C. Hale. We do it now. We'll need money. Your parents will have to help. We need to make this look legitimate. I'll book a photographer. It was all there. A conspiracy to defraud the company, to commit expense fraud, and to blackmail a senior executive, me, using a manufactured public spectacle as leverage. The atrium wasn't a spontaneous celebration. It was a premeditated act of extortion. My hands were perfectly steady. I began the process of sealing the evidence. I created a new case file. I named it Investigation Atrium. I exported the server logs, the ethics tip, the hotel PDF, the restored Slack conversations, and the video files from the atrium cameras. I compiled my own calendar entry for the Project Omega review and the full text of policies 4.01 and 4.02.c. I bundled them into a single AES 256 encrypted container file. I initiated the chain of custody protocol, a digital ledger that timestamped the creation of the file and would track every time it was accessed, by whom, and for what purpose. It was now a tamper-proof evidence locker. My signature, Avery Lane, DIR, Ethics and Risk, was burned into the metadata. I looked at my desk phone. Carter was probably upstairs, in my office, waiting to perform his second act. The concerned, confused husband. Or perhaps he was with Sloan, celebrating. It didn't matter. I did not call my husband. I did not call my mother. I dialed the 3-digit extension for the general counsel. Elara, I said, my voice as flat and cool as the air in the vault. It's Avery. I've just sealed an evidence locker for an active investigation. It involves a senior employee in growth and a material breach of corporate governance. I need to brief you, in person, now. A pause. How bad? Elara asked. They tried to light the house on fire. Elara, I said, they just didn't realize I'm the one who holds the insurance policy. I hung up. I opened my corporate calendar. I created a new event. Title: Mandatory All-Hands Town Hall. A commitment to transparency and ethics. Attendees: all staff. West Haven. Date: in 2 weeks. Location: the atrium. I clicked send. The trap was set. Now, I just had to wait for the bait to work. My phone remained silent for 3 days following the atrium ambush. I had given no statement. I hadn't gone home to the house I shared with Carter. I had moved into my corporate apartment, a sterile, high-rise unit Hearthline kept for visiting executives, and I had continued my work. My silence was a vacuum, and my family, who thrive on noise and reaction, could not stand it. The summons came, as expected, via text from my mother. We are having a family dinner. Sunday, 6 p.m., be here. We are settling this. It was not a request. It was the same tone she used when I was 15 and had tried to skip a holiday. A command performance. They believed my silence was weakness. They thought I was wounded, cornered, and ready to be processed. They had staged the public execution. Now it was time for the private butchering. I agreed to meet. I drove my own car to their house in the suburbs, the house I'd paid the second mortgage on, the one where Sloane's art still hung on the walls. I parked on the street, not in the driveway. I carried a thin, leather-bound briefcase. Inside it were 2 items, a sealed, heavyweight manila envelope and a digital audio recorder, matte black and no larger than a key fob. I stood on the porch, the smell of my mother's overcooked pot roast and old resentment seeping through the door. I pressed the record button. The small LED blinked once, green, and then went dark. I slipped it into my jacket pocket. One-party consent is a beautiful thing in this state. I let myself in. They were waiting in the good living room, the one with the plastic-covered lampshades and the beige carpet that still held faint stains from one of Sloane's creative spills. My father, Mark, stood by the unlit fireplace, trying to look patriarchal. My mother, Judith, sat perched on the edge of the sofa, her hands clasped, and Sloane, she was the queen, enthroned in the center armchair, one hand protectively, performatively, on her abdomen. Carter was not there. He had been rendered a mere biological function, a supporting cast member in their drama. "Avery," my mother began, dispensing with pleasantries, "you've had your time to process. Now we need to be practical." "Practical," I repeated. The word was a weapon they always tried to use against me. "Sloane is moving into the Crestview apartments. They're secure. Good for a baby," Judith continued. "And Carter needs to focus. He's going to be a father. He can't be distracted by this. This was me, our marriage, my entire life." "They need a fresh start," my father said, his voice taking on the booming, reasonable tone he used when he was about to say something profoundly unreasonable. "And Sloane can't be stressed. It's bad for the baby." "So," my mother concluded, "you will, of course, be paying for the apartment, the deposit, and the first 6 months' rent, just like we discussed, and a stipend. For Sloane, it's the least you can do." I stood. I did not sit. I let the demand hang in the stale air. I looked at Sloane. She was smiling, a small, smug curl of her lips. She had won. She had taken my husband and was now here to collect the prize money. "You've had a difficult life, Avery. We know that," my father said, attempting a disastrous pivot to empathy. "But you're in a position of power now. You're a director. You have resources. Your sister has nothing. It's time for you to finally step up and help your family. For once." For once, the words echoed. The 16-year-old me, smelling of diner grease, flashed in my vision. The 20-year-old me, learning my college fund was gone. The 30-year-old me, signing the check for this very mortgage. "I see," I said. My voice was quiet, but it cut through the room. "You've prepared a comprehensive financial demand. I, too, have prepared for this meeting." I walked to the glass-topped coffee table. I placed the leather briefcase on it and opened the snaps. I removed the heavyweight manila envelope. It landed on the glass with a solid, definitive thud. Sloane's eyes lit up, as if she thought it was a check. "What's that?" Judith asked, suspicious. "It's my contribution to the discussion," I said. I pulled the document from the unsealed flap. It was 40 pages long, bound in blue cardstock. "This is my prenuptial agreement, Carter's copy. Actually, I had my counsel send it over." My father scoffed. "A prenup? Avery, this is a family matter. We're talking about a baby." "I'm aware, but this is a legal matter, and a financial one," I said. I flipped to page 12, section 4, Covenants. I turned it around for them to see. I had highlighted the relevant passage. Section 4.2, the loyalty clause. I read aloud, my voice as calm as if I were reading a quarterly projection. "A material breach of fidelity, defined as any romantic or sexual relationship with a third party, shall result in the immediate and irrevocable forfeiture of all claims by the breaching party," that would be Carter, "to any and all marital assets, including but not limited to unvested stock options, property appreciation, and spousal support." The room went silent. The implications settled like dust. Sloane was the first to break. "That's between you and Carter. That has nothing to do with me." "It has everything to do with you," I said, my gaze locking on hers. "The assets you are demanding I liquidate to pay for your apartment? They are the same assets Carter just forfeited. By choosing to be with you, he chose to be broke, and by extension, so did you. You backed a losing horse, Sloane." You can't," Judith sputtered, her face turning a blotchy red. "You wouldn't. He's your husband. He's the father of her. He is, I agreed, and he signed the document, as did I. In this state, it's ironclad. My mother stood up, her hands shaking. You would apply law to your own family? To blood? This is sick, Avery. This is cold. I smiled. It was a thin, brittle thing, devoid of any warmth. The law exists precisely because of blood. Judith, it's the contingency plan for when family, and decency, and trust fail. It's the ultimate practicality, wouldn't you say? My father looked stunned. He was a bully who only understood brute force. The structured violence of a legal contract was beyond him. Sloane, however, was already recalculating. I saw the gears turning. If I was willing to financially destroy Carter, my own husband, she was in real trouble. Her primary revenue stream had just been cut off. So, she pivoted. She went on the offensive. Fine, she snapped. Keep your money. I don't need it. I don't need you. She reached into her designer knockoff bag and pulled out her own sheaf of papers. I've just been offered a contract. West Haven Maternity. They're a new local brand. They want me to be their modern mom ambassador. They love my story. My story? The story of the woman who slept with her sister's husband. It's a big deal. Sloane barreled on, her confidence surging back. But the payments are staggered. They want a guarantor on the contract, just until the first media run. A guarantor, I said. Yes, you, she said, her eyes gleaming with a new, feverish light. You'll co-sign. It's the least you can do. Avery, if you're going to destroy Carter's life, you owe me this. You owe this baby this. It's a way for you to support us without just writing a check. She slid the contract across the table. My name was already typed in as guarantor. They had planned this. This was their plan B. If I wouldn't pay her rent, I would underwrite her fame. I picked up the contract. I read the first page. The numbers were small, but the liability was total. If she breached, I would be on the hook for the full amount, plus damages. I looked up at her. You want my professional reputation, my credit, my legal signature. You want me to stake my name on your story. It's for the baby, she said, her hand returning to her stomach like a shield. I held her gaze for a long, cold moment, and then I made my move. Fine, I said. The shock in the room was palpable. My father blinked. My mother sat down heavily. Sloane looked triumphant. But, I continued, I have one condition. I reached back into my briefcase and pulled out the second item. Not the prenup. This was a simple, 2-page document. It looked like a standard medical intake form. What is that? Sloane asked, her victory faltering. It's a formality, I said, my tone shifting to one of bored, corporate efficiency. If I'm going to be the guarantor on a contract for West Haven Maternity, and if I'm going to be financially entangled with this child, I'm adding the baby to my executive supplemental insurance policy. It's the best one Hearthline offers. It covers everything. This was a lie, but it was a believable one. To do that, I went on, tapping the paper. My provider requires full documentation for the dependent, standard underwriting procedure. They need to establish legal parentage. It's just red tape. You know how insurance companies are. I handed her the form and a pen. It's just a consent form. It authorizes a non-invasive prenatal paternity test. We'll get the results, file them with the policy, and I'll sign your contract. Simple. Sloane looked at the form. It was dense with medical and legal jargon. Paternity? My father said, frowning. We know who the father is. It's Carter. And this will prove it, I said smoothly. Not looking at him, I looked only at Sloane. It's just a box to check. Sloane, is there a reason we shouldn't check it? Her eyes flashed. She was cornered. To refuse was to admit something. To admit something was to lose the contract, her new golden ticket. She was so focused on the prize, the ad campaign, the public validation, that she couldn't see the bars of the trap. She thought I was capitulating, beaten down by her modern mom narrative. No, she snapped. It's Carter. It's fine. Give me the pen. She didn't read the second page. She didn't read the fine print in Section 4, the clause that looked like standard HIPAA boilerplate. Hereby authorize the testing facility, LabCorp Diagnostics, West Haven, to release any and all results pertaining to file P2990 directly to the policyholder, Avery Lane, and to her designated legal counsel, Ilara Voss of Voss and Associates, for the purposes of insurance underwriting and related legal and estate planning. She scribbled her name, Sloan Lane, in her looping, dramatic signature. The ink was a stark, angry blue on the white paper. I took the form back. I folded it neatly and placed it in my briefcase. I picked up her contract. I'll have my counsel review this and coordinate the testing appointment with you, I said. I snapped the briefcase shut. We'll be in touch. I turned and walked out of the living room. I didn't say goodbye. I got to my car. I could see them through the window, clustered together. My mother was holding Sloane's arm. My father was pacing. They were already celebrating. They thought they had won. They thought they had successfully leveraged my shame into a new, guaranteed income stream. I started the engine and pulled away from the curb. The digital recorder in my pocket had captured every word. The demand for money, the admission of the affair, the conspiracy to force my hand. But the real prize was the signed piece of paper in my briefcase. The trap, which had been set the moment Sloane stepped into the atrium, had just closed, and she had locked it herself, with her own signature. The call came 4 days later, not from a lab, but from Ilara, my attorney. The file is in the secure portal. Avery, she said, her voice devoid of inflection. I've reviewed it. You need to see this. I was in the corporate apartment, which felt less like a home and more like a high-end containment cell. The air was dry, recycled, silent. I terminated the call, opened my encrypted laptop, and navigated the two-factor authentication to Ilara's client portal. One file, P2990 Final, PDF. I opened it. My eyes skipped the boilerplate, the disclaimers, the methodology. I went straight to the conclusion. Patient, Lane, Sloan, alleged father 1, AF1. Hale, Carter. Ref hier, HXX Wellness. Analysis. DNA comparison utilized 24 genetic markers. Result, Carter Hale is excluded as the biological father of the fetus. Probability of paternity, 0.0%. I didn't gasp. I didn't feel a surge of relief, or even shock. It was simply the invalidation of a primary data point. My working hypothesis was wrong. I had been operating under the assumption that this was a simple, sordid affair between my sister and my husband. This result meant it was something else, something more complex. I scrolled down. Alleged father 2, AF2. Sample B. Refresh HXX Wellness, 008. Analysis. DNA comparison utilized 24 genetic markers. Result, the alleged father, sample B, cannot be excluded as the biological father of the fetus. Probability of paternity, 99.99%. Sample B. When I had Ilara submit the test request, I had done so with a contingency. Using my administrative oversight of the Executive Wellness Program, a voluntary biometric screening for senior management, I had pulled the anonymized DNA reference profiles for every male executive on Carter's team and in his direct reporting line. It was a long shot, a net cast in the dark. Carter was sample A. The others, in anonymized sequence, were samples B through G. My hypothesis had been that Carter was the father, and the 0.00% result was the weapon I needed. I had not truly anticipated a match on the secondary panel. My hands moved, separate from my thoughts, navigating back to the secure Hearthline server. I accessed the anonymized executive database. I located the file reference, HXX Wellness 008. I toggled the de-anonymization key, a privilege afforded only to my specific role in the event of a medical emergency or a Level 1 compliance breach. I considered this both. The name populated the field. Renford, Miles. Miles Renford, our Executive Vice President of Global Marketing, a man with a corner office, a carefully curated family man brand, and most importantly, Carter Hale's direct supervisor. The entire atrium ambush replayed in my mind, but this time, the pixels resolved, the lighting changed, the actors rearranged themselves. This wasn't Carter's conspiracy. Carter was a pawn. He was the decoy. This was Miles's conspiracy. My fingers flew across the keyboard. I had the what. The baby was Miles's. I had the who. Miles Renford. I needed the how and the why. I pulled the expense reports for the Employee Families Day. It was a marketing initiative. Ostensibly, the budget code was MKTGQ3, Brand Culture. I had seen the initial proposal. It was meant to be a small, internal affair. The event in the atrium, the cupcakes, the staging, the PR photographer, was a significant overspend. I pulled the approval chain. The initial request was submitted by Carter's department, but the overages, the additions, the specific line item for External Media Relations, B. Karras, Ben Karras, the photographer, had been added 72 hours before the event. The final signature, the one that pushed the fraudulent budget through, was not Carter's. It was Miles Renford's. Miles had paid for it. He had used corporate funds to provide his mistress, Sloane, with a stage. He had financed the public spectacle designed to humiliate me. But why? I pulled the Slack logs I had already saved, the ones between Carter and Bluebird. C. Hale. Someone fucking knows. An anonymous tip just came in. I think it's from her department. She's trying to fire me. C. Hale. We need a new narrative, one where we are the victims. Carter thought the anonymous tip was about him and Sloane, but what if it wasn't? I went back to the ethics hotline. The tipster had said, check his corporate card expenses. I pulled the hotel folio again. North Shore Inn, guest, C. Hale, payment, Amex, X002, Carter's card, Carter's name. But now, I had a new variable. Miles. What if Sloane wasn't just sleeping with Miles? What if she was sleeping with them both? The hypothesis was messy, but it fit the data. Sloane, my sister, she didn't just want a provider, she wanted a portfolio. She had secured Carter, my husband, as her emotional and financial leverage against me, and she had secured Miles, Carter's boss, as her source of power and, as it turned out, the father of her child. The affair with Carter was real. His panic in the Slack logs was genuine. He was afraid of me finding out. The affair with Miles was the master plan. The atrium ambush was Sloane and Miles's masterstroke. They staged it using Carter as the designated father. Carter, cornered and desperate, went along with it, believing it was his plan to get ahead of the narrative. The goals were threefold. Sloane and Miles would successfully pin the baby on Carter. Carter, trapped, would be forced to divorce me, triggering the prenup, but the public humiliation would force me, Avery, to pay Sloane a massive support settlement to make the problem go away, saving both Carter, Sloane's pawn, and Miles, Sloane's partner, from any financial responsibility. I would be extorted into funding my own divorce and financing my sister's new life with my husband's boss. It was brilliant. It was intricate, and it was deeply, profoundly sick. They had just made one mistake. They had underestimated my commitment to data integrity. I needed one more piece, the visual confirmation. I went back to the security server. I bypassed the atrium. I went to the executive parking garage, level P1, the C-suite spots, query, all footage, camera P1 E04, covering spots, 00100, correlate, IDM, Renford, Tesla Model S, Plaid, and Guest Pass S, Lane, search period, 90 days. The server spooled. It found a match, and another, and another. I clicked the most recent one, 2 weeks ago. Timestamp, 1930. Miles Renford, in his Patagonia vest, walked toward his car. Beside him, Sloane. He wasn't looking at her. He was scanning the garage. He opened the passenger door for her. Before she got in, he placed his hand on the small of her back, a gesture of casual, profound ownership. He looked around once more, then got into the driver's side. The Tesla's lights flashed, and it pulled silently out of the bay. I exported the file. P Garage 1930 Renford Lane, MP4. I saved it to the encrypted evidence locker. Investigation Atrium, alongside the paternity test, the Slack logs, the hotel folio, the expense report, and the Atrium video. The chain of custody was now complete. I pulled up the corporate governance manual. I didn't need the mid-level policy this time. I needed the executive one. Hearthline. C-Suite Conduct Policy, 8.1d. Fiduciary Obligations and Conflicts. An executive-level officer, EVP and above, bears a heightened fiduciary responsibility. Any romantic or sexual relationship with a family member of a direct subordinate employee is deemed an irredeemable conflict of interest, creating a toxic and legally compromised work environment. Any misuse of corporate funds or assets to facilitate, conceal, or promote such a relationship will be treated as material fraud and grounds for immediate termination with cause, forfeiting all unvested equity and deferred compensation. Miles hadn't just broken the rules, he had used the company as a weapon in a personal extortion scheme. The board of directors would hate this. Our board is composed of old money and institutional investors. They like silence. They like quiet resignations and sealed settlements. They would see this as a domestic dispute that had gotten out of hand. They would want to pay Sloane, fire Carter as a scapegoat, and give Miles a quiet warning. They would want to bury it. But I am the director of ethics and risk. A risk buried alive doesn't die. It festers. It waits. And it always comes back. I don't deal in silence. I deal in evidence. And the sound of my compiled evidence was deafening. I opened a new file on my desktop. Town Hall Presentation. I selected the Hearthline corporate template, the black one, reserved for serious financial or legal announcements. I began to build the slides. Slide 1. A commitment to transparency and ethics. Slide 2. Our guiding principle. Policy 4.01a, Conflict of Interest. Slide 3. Our standard. Policy 4.02c, Performance Reviews. This one was for Carter. Slide 4. Our mandate. Executive Policy 8.1d, Fiduciary Duty. This one was for Miles. The design was simple. Black background, white, serif font, no images, no charts. Just the text of the policies they had broken, and, at the bottom of each slide, a simple, red timestamp, 234201, access log, C. Hale, S. Lane, 140244, expense report, M. Renford, B. Karras, 1930-11, video log, P. Garage, M. Renford, S. Lane. I created a final, blank, black slide. This was my kill switch. This was the slide I would put up if they tried to fight me, if they tried to lie, if Miles tried to claim it was a misunderstanding, or that Carter was the sole bad actor. On this slide, I would embed the video file. P. Garage, 1930 Renford Lane, MP4. The town hall was in 1 week. Miles and Carter would be there, sitting in the front rows, expecting me to announce a new compliance initiative. Sloane and my parents would be there, too. I would make sure of it, by leaking the invite through Carter. They wouldn't be able to resist another chance to see me squirm. They were all coming to my stage, and I knew, down to the second, exactly when to play the tape. The atrium was packed. A mandatory, all-hands meeting 2 weeks after a public scandal was guaranteed to have perfect attendance. The air was electric with gossip and anticipation. They had come to see the fallout. They had come to see me, the director of ethics, The cuckolded wife. Either resign in shame or deliver a tearful, pre-approved HR statement. I stood on the same temporary stage where our CEO usually delivered optimistic projections. I wore a charcoal gray sheath dress, no jewelry save my watch, and my hair was pulled back into a severe functional knot. I was not here as a wife. I was here as an auditor. In the front row, my family, Carter, my husband, sat between my parents, Mark and Judith. They had formed a phalanx of support for him. They looked defiant, righteous, ready for me to make a fool of myself. They were here as the victors, attending the surrender. Further back, near the glass-paneled wall, stood the real power players. Sloane, my sister, hand resting on her stomach, a picture of blooming, weaponized motherhood, and beside her, looking relaxed and confident, was Miles Renford, EVP of Marketing. They were standing slightly apart, but their proximity was a quiet statement of its own. Miles had likely advised her to come, to present a united front with Carter, to finalize the narrative. And in the press-designated aisle, a single photographer, Ben Karras, the same one from the ambush, Miles, an expert in optics, had undoubtedly invited him, expecting to capture my professional implosion for the West Haven Gazette. I gripped the sides of the podium. The microphone hummed to life. "Good morning," I said, my voice amplified, sterile, and calm. The room hushed. "Thank you for attending. Today's town hall is on a core pillar of our brand, a culture of respect." A corporate groan rippled through the middle management. They clicked their pens, expecting a boring HR seminar. Respect, however, isn't a poster in the break room. I continued, my eyes scanning the crowd. It isn't free coffee or family's day. Respect is a function of accountability. It is the baseline expectation that our actions and our data are in alignment. When they are not, it is the responsibility of my office to investigate. Today, I am here to discuss a recent investigation. Case file, Atrium. The name landed like a stone. The sound of pens clicking stopped. Every phone was put down. Carter, in the front row, went rigid. "An investigation is simply a review of data," I said, clicking the remote in my hand. The massive screen behind me lit up. "Let's review the data." The first slide appeared. It was a simple, black and white text log. Event. Access granted. Location. 19 exec growth. Door. 19112. Timestamp. 23/42/01. Tuesday. Authorization. E8812. C. Hale. Guest. S. Lane. At 23:42 on a Tuesday, 2 months ago, a guest pass was used to access an executive office on the 19th floor in violation of building security protocols. Carter's face went ashen. He knew that log. My parents looked confused, glancing at him. I clicked again, the hotel folio, redacted, but the key lines were clear. Hotel. North Shore Inn, payment. Amex. X. Corp T&E. Charges. Room service. 1 bottle. Veuve Clicquot. 1 oysters. A corporate card was used to pay for a personal rendezvous at a non-approved vendor. This is a violation of our T&E policy. It is, by definition, expense fraud. Carter looked like he was going to be sick. He sank lower in his chair. I clicked again, the Slack logs. User A. Someone fucking knows. An anonymous tip just came in. User B. What? We haven't done anything wrong. User A. We need a new narrative, one where we are the victims. We'll force her hand. User B. You mean, we do it? Now? User A. We do it now. I'll book a photographer. A conspiracy, I stated, my voice flat, was initiated on company servers to create a new narrative and force the hand of another employee. This is a premeditated plan to leverage a personal matter for financial gain. It is corporate blackmail. The room was so quiet, I could hear the air conditioning. Every single person in that atrium, from the analysts to the VPs, was leaning forward. They knew, everyone knew, who this was about. They were just watching the axe fall in slow motion. My eyes found Carter. He was staring at the floor, a man already executed. My parents looked horrified, their faces pale. Judith's mouth was open. Mark looked furious, his anger a defense against his own stupidity. Our policies are not suggestions, I said, clicking to the next slide. Policy 4.02C on conflicts of interest filled the screen. You cannot sit on a review panel for a project authored by someone with whom you have an undisclosed personal relationship. To do so is a material breach of conduct. I paused. And Policy 8.1D states that misuse of corporate funds to facilitate a compromised relationship is grounds for immediate termination. Whoever breaks these rules writes their own resignation. I let that hang in the air. Carter was finished. His career at Hearthline was over. My family's leverage was gone. But I wasn't finished. This was the conclusion of the initial investigation, I said, my voice shifting. However, new data was presented, and the initial narrative, the one conspired in those Slack messages, was found to be a fabrication. The data, as it turned out, was incomplete. Carter's head snapped up. His eyes, full of despair, met mine. He was confused. What was this? Sloane, by the wall, shifted, her hand tightening on her stomach. Miles gave her a small, reassuring look, as if this was all part of my messy, emotional breakdown. The core of the conspiracy, I said, rested on a single biological assertion. My office, in partnership with legal, conducted a verification of that data. I clicked the final slide. It was not a picture, it was just text, simple, clinical, and devastating. Investigation. Atrium. Paternity verification alleged. Father 1. Employee ID. E8812. Excluded probability of paternity. 0.00%. Alleged Father 2. Employee ID. H0008. Cannot be excluded. Probability of paternity. 99.999%. The silence in the room broke. A wave of gasps, of whispers. 0.0%. Carter stared at the screen, his mind visibly catching up. He was not the father. The entire public humiliation, the plan he'd co-signed, the career he'd just torched, was based on a lie. His face crumpled, not in guilt, but in the dawning, idiotic horror of the patsy. This, a voice, loud and furious, cut through the atrium. Miles Renford. He had stormed forward, stepping away from Sloane, his face purple with rage. "This is an absolute disgrace," he shouted, pointing at me. "This is a private, family matter. This is slander. You have no right to display this." His voice boomed. He was an EVP. He was used to commanding a room. He was trying to shut me down. And right on cue, a camera flash exploded from the aisle. Ben Karras, the photographer, was documenting the entire thing. Miles had invited him to see me destroyed. Instead, the lens was now focused squarely on the apoplectic EVP of marketing, who had just personally claimed a stake in the private matter of the 0% paternity test. Miles had just identified himself. "You are absolutely right, Miles," I said, my voice dropping, but the microphone carried it perfectly. "It is a private matter." I clicked the remote. The paternity slide vanished, replaced by the blank, black screen. "It's a private matter," I repeated. "That was made public in this very room, with corporate funds you approved." I clicked again, the final image. It was not a spreadsheet. It was a high-definition still from the parking garage security camera. P Garage, 1930 as Renford Lane. MP4. The timestamp was in the corner, bright red. The image was clear. Miles Renford, hand placed firmly, possessively, on the small of Sloane's back, guiding her into his Tesla. The gesture was not one of professional courtesy, It was one of intimate, casual ownership. A sound, a strangled, collective ooh filled the atrium. Sloane Lane, my sister, stumbled backward, her hand flying to her mouth. She looked trapped. Carter Hale, my husband, followed her gaze, saw his boss, saw his lover, and the 99.9% on the previous slide, and he finally understood. He understood that he was not the conspirator. He was the fool. He was the decoy. My father, Mark, just stared, his mouth slack. But my mother, Judith, was faster. Her eyes darted from the screen to Sloane, and then to the furious, frozen figure of Miles Renford. She knew that car. She knew that man. She gasped. It was not a whisper. It was a sharp, horrified intake of breath that the entire silent room heard. "Miles?" she said. "No." She shrieked his name. "Oh my God! Miles Renford?" The camera flashed again. Click, click, click. Karras was earning his fee. I stepped back to the podium. The fire was lit. The exits were sealed. "I called this town hall to talk about respect," I said, my voice cutting through the chaos like ice. A false narrative was staged here. A conspiracy to commit fraud and extort a senior employee was executed, using corporate assets, approved by executive leadership. My eyes found Miles. Hearthline Policy 8.1D is clear. Misuse of corporate funds to facilitate a compromised relationship is material fraud. Grounds for termination with cause. My eyes found my parents. My family demanded I support this, that I pay for this lie to protect them. I looked out at the entire, shocked, silent room. We protect our families, our corporate family, and our personal ones, with the truth, not with cover-ups. I leaned forward. This matter, and all accompanying evidence in the Atrium file, is now with the Board of Directors and Legal Counsel. I pressed the mute button on the podium. The small red light went off. "Thank you for your time." The sound of my muted microphone was the loudest thing in the atrium. The silence it left was a vacuum, instantly filled by the explosion of 100 frantic, whispered conversations. People were not just talking. They were moving, physically recoiling from the epicenter, from Miles, from Carter, from Sloane, from my parents. Ben Karras's camera was the only thing still working with professional detachment, the click-click-click of its shutter providing a rhythmic, metallic pulse to the chaos. Miles Renford was frozen, his face a mask of apoplectic rage. The image of his hand on Sloane's back still burned into the air. Sloane, for her part, had finally dissolved. Her modern mom mask had shattered, and she was sobbing, ugly, gasping, real tears of pure, unadulterated panic. My parents were human shields around her, my mother glaring at me with a hatred so potent it was almost visible, my father just looking stunned, his mouth hanging open. And Carter, my husband, he was staring at the blank screen, his face white, his eyes hollow. He had been so focused on his own small betrayal that he had completely missed the larger one he was a part of. He was a pawn who had just been sacrificed, and he finally knew it. "This town hall is concluded," a new voice said, sharp and authoritative. Elara Voss, our general counsel, stepped forward from the front row where she had been sitting next to the CFO. Her face was grim, her eyes missing nothing. She was no longer an observer. She was the company's designated cleanup crew. She gave a curt nod to the head of security, who had been waiting by the back doors. The spectacle was over. The containment had begun. I stepped off the low stage, my heels clicking on the marble. The crowd parted for me, a sea of my colleagues, their faces a mix of awe, pity, and raw, undisguised terror. They looked at me like I was a nuclear event. I walked past Miles. He saw me, and his face contorted. "You," he spat. "You're finished. Lane, you're fucking finished." I didn't break my stride. "You first, Mr. Renford," I said, my voice too low for anyone else to hear. I didn't stop until I was standing in the front row, directly in front of my husband. He was still seated, trapped between my apoplectic parents. He looked up at me, his eyes pleading. "Avery, I didn't know about Miles, I swear." "It doesn't matter," I said. It was the simple truth. From my briefcase, which I had retrieved from the podium, I took out the blue-bound, 40-page document. I didn't hand it to him. I dropped it onto his lap. It landed with a soft, heavy thud. He stared at it, the prenuptial agreement. "Section 4.2, I said, my voice clinical. "The loyalty clause. You breached. You know it, I know it. And now, thanks to those Slack logs, the company knows it." I turned my head just slightly, enough to acknowledge Alara, who was now standing nearby, observing the orderly transfer of power. "Alara, as counsel is aware, a breach of this clause results in the immediate forfeiture of all claims to marital assets, including property and spousal support." I paused, then delivered the final, corporate cut. "It also nullifies his claim to all unvested stock options and deferred compensation tied to our joint spousal filing. He is, as of this moment, financially severed." Alara nodded once. "The board has been briefed on the terms, Ms. Lane. The forfeiture is understood and will be processed by payroll and our external administrators." Carter, who had just lost his wife, his dignity, and his lover, now watched millions of dollars in unvested equity evaporate. His face, which had been pale, turned a sickly, greenish-gray. "But that," I continued, looking back down at him, "is just the personal matter. Then there is the professional." I raised my voice just enough for the HR managers, who were hovering like nervous vultures, to hear clearly. "Effective immediately, Carter Hale is suspended from all duties, without pay, pending a formal termination review." This, finally, animated him. He shot to his feet. "Suspended? For what? I was the victim here." He pointed, wildly, at Miles, who was now being quietly, but firmly, spoken to by 2 uniformed security guards. I'm the one who was lied to." "You are suspended," I said, my voice like a blade, "for violating Policy 4.02c. You sat on my Project Omega review panel. You had a duty to disclose your conflict of interest. You failed. Instead, you actively worked to sabotage a critical compliance initiative while compromised. You used your position to attack my work, believing it would give you leverage in our personal life. That is a material breach of your duties as an employee. The affair was a personal failure. The conflict of interest was a corporate crime." He had no answer. He collapsed back into his chair as if his strings had been cut. Alara stepped in, addressing the room. "The company will be making no further statement at this time. This is now an active investigation being handled by the board's ethics committee." She turned to the guards by Miles. "Mr. Renford, you are on administrative leave. You will be escorted from the building. You will not access your computer. You will not speak to your team. You will surrender your badge and company property. You will hear from external counsel." "You can't do this," Miles bellowed. But the fight was gone. He was a deflated balloon. The photographer's camera flashed, capturing the image of the executive VP of global marketing being bracketed by security. I walked to Alara. From my briefcase, I produced the sealed, tamper-proof evidence bag containing the digital recorder from my parents' house. I also handed her a small, encrypted USB drive. "Alara," I said, formally, "this is the complete evidence locker for investigation. Atrium. The chain of custody is intact and documented. It includes the original video files, the server logs, the paternity results, and the audio recording of the subsequent financial demands." I held her gaze. "As I am a material witness and the primary target of the conspiracy, I am formally recusing myself. The investigation is now in the hands of the board's committee." "Thank you, Avery," she said, taking the package. "The committee is grateful for your thoroughness, your Discretion in handling this has been noted. I knew what she meant. I hadn't gone to the West Haven Gazette. I had kept the cancer inside the building, where I could cut it out myself. I turned to leave. My path to the atrium doors was clear, except for two people. My parents, my father. Mark stepped in front of me. My mother was behind him, her face a tear-streaked mask of fury, her arms wrapped around the sobbing, hysterical Sloane. "Avery," my father's voice was low, shaking with a rage I hadn't seen since I'd refused to give him money for one of his failed investment schemes. "Are you proud of yourself? Is this what you wanted?" I said nothing. I just looked at him. "You've torn this family apart," he hissed. "You've humiliated your sister. You've destroyed Carter's life. You've ruined that man." He gestured toward Miles, who was now being walked, stiff-legged, toward the service elevator. "I did that?" I asked, my voice genuinely curious. "You did, with your slides and your recordings." His face was mottled red. "For what, Avery? Because you were angry? Because your feelings were hurt? We are your family. Did you have to go this far? Did you really have to do this in front of everyone?" I looked at my father, the man who had enabled my sister's sociopathy her entire life, the man who had sold my college fund to pay for her art, the man who, just days ago, had sat in his living room and demanded I pay for my own betrayal. "This," I said, and my voice was so quiet. He had to lean in to hear it. "This wasn't far. This was the bare minimum." He recoiled as if I'd slapped him. "This was a simple course correction," I said. "This was not revenge. This was risk mitigation. You and Mom and Sloane. You were a contingent liability, an unsecured debt. Today, I just closed the account. I just balanced the books." My mother shrieked, "You ungrateful? After everything we—" I didn't wait to hear the rest. I stepped around my father. I walked across the marble floor. I could feel every eye on my back. I could hear my mother's voice rising in hysteria. I could hear Sloane wail, "You'll pay for this, Avery! You'll pay!" At the far end of the atrium, 2 more security guards had appeared. They were not for Miles. They were for Carter. They took up positions near the front row, not touching him, but ensuring he was contained. He was an asset to be monitored. I reached the massive glass doors of the main entrance. I could hear Carter say my name, just once. "Avery." It wasn't a call. It was the sound of a man drowning. I paused. The sunlight was bright on the other side of the glass. I did not turn around. I did not look back. I pushed the door open and stepped out into the clean, cold, silent air. The aftermath of a detonation is not loud. It is a profound, ringing silence. I sat in the corporate apartment, 19 floors above the quieted atrium. The town hall had been 3 hours ago. The internal memos had already been distributed by Alara, crisp and efficient, Miles Renford, termination with cause, Carter Hale, termination for material breach of conduct. The West Haven Gazette had already posted Ben Karras's article online. Scandal at Hearthline, EVP and director fired in public ethics meeting. It was a contained burn. The stock had dipped 1.5% and was already recovering. The board was satisfied. The cancer had been excised. My work phone was in a drawer, on silent, as per Alara's instruction. My personal phone, however, lay on the granite countertop. It was a dark, silent rectangle. It had been silent for 3 hours. The silence was, in itself, a testament to their shock. They were regrouping, processing their total, systemic failure. At 5:17 p.m., it buzzed. A text from my mother. "Judith, you made your point. You humiliated everyone. Are you happy now? That baby is innocent. Sloane is hysterical. You are still her sister. You need to fix this. You still need to help." I read the words, "You still need to help." They were immutable, like a law of physics. No matter the data, no matter the facts, no matter the betrayal, their base equation never changed. Avery provides, Sloane receives. I was not a person to them. I was a resource, a utility, a high-yield bond they believed they had a right to cash. Even now, after I had detonated their lives, they were standing in the smoking crater, holding out their hands, demanding I pay for the cleanup. "Okay," I said to the empty, sterile room. "Help." I sat at the desk, opened my laptop, and began the final audit. First, I opened my bank's website. I navigated to wire transfers. I pulled up Sloane's account information, which I had saved from the last time I'd paid her emergency rent, 2 years prior. I typed her name, Sloane Lane. I typed her account number. I typed the amount, $1. In the memo line, I wrote, "Per your request, financial support." As defined, I clicked Confirm. The US dollar, a unit of pure, unsentimental fact, was transferred. Second, I opened a new email. To Sloane Lane, creative@gmail.com, CC Mark Lane, associates at Comcast, net, Judith Lane at Comcast, net, BCC, Alara, Voss at Voss Legal, com, legal counsel. Subject: Resources and clarification regarding your request for support. Sloane, I am in receipt of your, and our parents', continued requests for financial support following the events of the past 2 weeks. I am writing to confirm that I am fulfilling this request, in accordance with both corporate and state legal guidelines. First, please find attached a confirmation of a wire transfer in the amount of $1, completing my personal financial contribution to your situation. See Attachment 1. Wire, confirm TRX9091. Second, to ensure there is no further confusion on the matter of support, let's clarify the term. Under State Name Family Law, Code 40-5101B, support is defined as the legal and financial obligation of a child's biological parents. The statute is clear. The mother and the biological father are, jointly and severally, responsible for the child's care, housing, and medical needs. I have attached the relevant statutes for your review and Attachment 2, State Family Law 4U5.pdf. As you are the mother, your obligation is established. As the verified non-invasive prenatal paternity test, Reference P2990, confirmed with 99.999% certainty. The biological father is Miles Renford. Therefore, your, and our parents', continued requests for support from me are misdirected. They should, legally, be directed to Mr. Renford. I am not, by any legal or factual definition, a party to this obligation. I paused, my fingers resting on the keys. This was the cold, clean truth. They had built their entire extortion plot on a foundation of lies. That Carter was the father, that I was the villain, that family guilt would override legal fact. I was simply replacing their narrative with the data. I continued typing. However, I did tell you I would help. I am a person who honors my commitments. You are now in a difficult position as an unemployed, single mother-to-be, and you require resources. I have compiled them for you. 1. Legal aid. To assist you in securing the full and fair financial support you are legally owed by Mr. Renford, I have provided the contact information for the West Haven Legal Aid Society. See Attachment 3. Legal Aid Intake, PDF. They offer services on a sliding scale and are well-versed in establishing paternity and enforcing child support orders. Given your current documented lack of income, you should qualify for their services at a minimal cost. 2. Paternity confirmation. While the prenatal test is conclusive, Mr. Renford's counsel may, unwisely, advise him to contest it. To expedite this, my counsel has already coordinated with his. A court-admissible DNA appointment has been scheduled for him at LabCorp Diagnostics for this Friday at 10:00 a.m. A copy of the court-filed order is attached for your records. See Attachment 4, Court Order, DNA Renford, PDF. Your presence is not required. 3. Professional resources. The maternity brand contract you presented, reference West Haven Maternity/LLC, is now, of course, null and void. The company's morals clause was invoked following the publication of the article in the West Haven Gazette. This leaves you in need of a new career path. Hearthline Nutrition proudly sponsors the Hearthline Steps program, a competitive, community-facing scholarship for single mothers in the West Haven area who are pursuing higher education or vocational training. It is a rigorous program designed to foster self-sufficiency. It does not, I must specify, provide cash stipends, rent, or other direct aid, but focuses on tuition and job placement. I have attached the 8-page application form and program guidelines, Attachment 5, Hearthline Steps App, PDF. The deadline for the spring cohort is in 2 weeks. I encourage you to apply. I believe this fully addresses and satisfies your request for help. I kept my word. I have provided you with support. It is, as I am, processed, documented, and in full compliance with the law. I am not, as you have been, supporting a lie. Do not contact me again. Avery Lane Director, Ethics and Risk, sent from my personal device. I hit send. The email, with its 5 attachments, was a digital cruise missile, a final, perfectly calibrated payload of cold, bureaucratic, practical help. It was everything I had promised, and nothing they wanted. I had given Sloan $1. I had given her the legal definition of her situation. I had given her the tools to hunt her actual provider, Miles, and I had given her an application for a scholarship, the ultimate insult to Sloan, who believed work was something other people did. I kept my word. I had not funded the wrong person. I had simply directed the liability to the correct cost center. I closed the laptop. The silence in the apartment felt different. It was no longer the ringing of a detonation. It was the quiet of a completed transaction, the clean, empty peace of a zero balance. My phone rang. The screen flashed. Father, I picked it up. Avery? His voice was gravelly, thick with a rage he was trying to keep leashed. Father, I just saw your email. Judith she's beside herself. We are speechless. I thought, quite clear. $1. Avery, he exploded, the leash breaking. Legal aid? A job application? Are you trying to kill your sister? This is cruel. This is the cruelest thing I've ever seen. You're sadistic. I held the phone to my ear, listening to his words. Cruel, sadistic, they were emotional, subjective, imprecise terms. No, Father, I said, my voice as calm as the air in the room. I'm not being cruel. I paused. I'm being accurate. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. You're not my daughter, he whispered, the anger gone, replaced by a hollow, cold realization. You're not human. You're something else, something cold. I'm the pragmatist, remember? I replied. The one you always said would figure it out. I've figured this out. The account is closed. He said nothing. I heard my mother wailing in the background. A thin, animal sound. He hung up. The click was absolute. I put the phone down. I turned back to my laptop. I opened one final file, one I'd kept for 13 years, ever since they'd sold my college fund. It was a simple Excel spreadsheet titled Lane Family Ledger. It was a long list of dates, items, and amounts. 2008, Sloan Art Collective, Call, Fund, $45,000. 2012, Sloan Startup, Bailout, $20,000. 2017, Parents' Second Mortgage, $32,000. 2023, Sloan, Rent Emergency, $4,800. The list went on. I navigated to the first empty cell at the bottom of the item column. 10/2025. S. Lane. M. Renford. C. Hale. J. Lane. M. Lane. Conspiracy, extortion, fraud. Refi as. Atrium. I tabbed to the amount column. I entered $100. Then, I tabbed to the final cell at the very bottom. the one labeled net balance. I typed the simple formula to sum the column. The number that appeared was vast, a sea of red ink representing a lifetime of theft. I looked at it, then I deleted the formula. I typed over it. Drones. I saved the file. I closed the program. I shut the laptop. The books were balanced. The debt, all of it, was finally and completely paid. 1 week later, I was standing in the 20th floor boardroom. The air was thin. The view over West Haven absolute. The oak table was so polished it looked like a dark, frozen lake. The board had been convened in a closed-door emergency session. Petrov, our CFO, was there. Maria Sanchez from HR, Ilara, our general counsel, and the 3 independent directors, all of whom looked deeply unhappy to be involved. My presentation was not a presentation. It was a summary. I did not show the garage video. I did not play the audio recordings. I simply handed them the executive summary of the evidence locker. Investigation. Atrium. The data is conclusive, I stated, my voice echoing slightly in the oversized room. You have the facts. We have multiple, severe breaches. Policy 8.1d. Executive misconduct. Policy 4.02c. Conflict of interest and project sabotage. Policy 3.01. Expense fraud. And a conspiracy to commit corporate blackmail using company assets. I did not need to interpret the data for them. They were men and women who thought in numbers, in risk, in liability. The exposure here is not financial, it is existential. I continued. This was not a personal matter, it was a systemic failure of leadership, originating from the C-suite. The West Haven Gazette article was a warning shot. If we do not act decisively, the next article will be in the Wall Street Journal, and it will be about our failed governance. It will suggest that our executive VP of marketing is running extortion schemes from his office. I let that sit. Petrov, who had so pointedly stared at the ceiling during the first ambush, was now staring at me. What is your recommendation, Ms. Lane? My recommendation is not a recommendation, I replied. It is the only course of action dictated by our own policies, the policies I am paid to enforce. Miles Renford must be terminated with cause, forfeiting all compensation, equity, and severance. Carter Hale must be terminated with cause, for breach of trust and material conflict of interest. Anything less than this, and you are inviting a shareholder lawsuit for gross negligence. My report is final. Ilara nodded. Counsel concurs. The legal risk of inaction is catastrophic. The risk of action is 0. The vote was a formality, a quiet raising of hands around the dark lake of the table. Unanimous. Thank you, gentlemen, I said. Maria, Ilara, we can proceed. The termination was scheduled for 2:00 p.m. Miles, as an executive, was handled separately. He was called into a meeting with the CEO and Ilara on the 20th floor. His severance was 0. His access was cut mid-meeting. He was escorted to the executive garage via a private elevator. His fall was silent, deep, and total. Carter was mid-level. His was handled by HR. At 1:57 p.m., my desk phone chimed. It was Maria Sanchez. Avery, we're in the lobby, at the designated security checkpoint. We are ready to process Mr. Hale. Your signature is required on the final incident report. I'm on my way, I said. I rode the elevator down, not to the B4 vault, but to the ground floor, the atrium, the scene of the crime. This was procedural. When an employee is terminated for cause, especially for ethics violations, the head of the investigating department must be present to sign the final physical documentation, attesting that the investigation is complete and the termination is justified. A small, temporary desk had been set up near the main security turnstiles. Maria Sanchez stood behind it, a grim professional expression on her face. Beside her stood a single, broad-shouldered security guard. And standing in front of the desk, looking lost and rumpled, was Carter. He was no longer the confident associate director of growth. He was just a man in a wrinkled suit, holding a cardboard box containing a coffee mug, a framed photo of us, which I noted with a surge of cold irony, and a desk plant. He saw me approaching. His face flushed, then went pale. "Avery, you don't have to do this." "I do, actually," I said, stopping at the desk. "It's policy." Maria slid a simple, white, business-sized envelope across the desk toward him. It had no name on it, just the Hearthline logo. "Carter," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "This envelope contains all the necessary information regarding your separation. It has your final pay, which is for your last pay period only. It has information on Cobra. It has a copy of the policies you violated, and it has the non-disclosure and non-disparagement agreement that legal requires you to sign." He stared at the white envelope as if it were a snake. This was it, the physical object of his erasure. "Please understand," Maria continued, "your access to all company systems, email, Slack, your network drive, has been revoked. Your building access will be deactivated, now." As she spoke, I watched the guard at the main security console type a command. "Wait." The voice was not Carter's. It was a shriek. We all turned. Sloane. She was bursting through the main glass doors. Her face streaked with tears. Her hair wild. My parents were right behind her, looking frantic. They had clearly been calling Carter, gotten no answer, and, in a final act of desperation, had driven here. "Avery, Carter! You can't let them do this!" Sloane rushed toward the desk, but the security guard stepped, almost lazily, into her path. "Ma'am, this is a private corporate matter," the guard said, his voice a polite baritone wail. "She's my sister!" Sloane screamed, pointing at me. "Avery, please, talk to them. Tell them it was a mistake. It was Miles. It was all Miles. Carter didn't know anything. Tell them." She had seen my email, the dollar, the legal aid forms. She knew Miles was gone. She knew her contract was void. She knew the money was gone. Carter was her last, pathetic hope. If he was fired, the severance, the support, the family she had tried to build, was utterly bankrupt. Carter looked at her. His face was a mask of dead, hollow confusion. "Sloane, what are you doing here?" "I'm here to save you," she sobbed. "Avery, please, as your sister, as family, please, don't do this. Think of the baby." She tried to push past the guard to grab my arm. I simply stepped back. From my own briefcase, I took out a single, folded packet of papers. I held it out to her. Sloane stopped crying, her eyes narrowing, thinking it was a check, thinking she had won. "You asked me to talk," I said. "This is what I have to say. You asked for help. This is help." She snatched the packet from my hand. She unfolded it. It was not a check. It was a copy of the appointment reminder for Miles Renford's court-ordered DNA test. It was a copy of the Hearthline STEPS program application. It was a brochure for the West Haven Community Clinic, with the hours for the single mother's support group circled in red ink. She looked at the papers. She looked at me, her face contorted, not with grief, but with pure, undiluted hatred. You bitch," she hissed. "Ma'am, I need you to step back," the guard said, his voice losing its politeness. "Carter." Sloane turned to him, her last hope. Carter just stared at her, then at the white envelope on the desk. He picked it up. His hand was shaking. He didn't look at me. He looked at the turnstile, the barrier between his old life and the new one. He turned. His shoulders slumped. He walked the few feet to the security gate. He raised his employee badge, the one still on his belt. He held it to the black sensor. A loud, piercing beep cut through the atrium. A bright red X flashed on the sensor. Access denied. The sound was final. It was the sound of a door locking, the sound of a life ending. He was, officially, no longer one of us. He was an outsider. He stood there, frozen, his badge still in his hand, a man locked out of his own life. The guard sighed, walked over, and tapped his own MasterCard. Beep, boop. The turnstile arms unlocked. "This way. Mr. Hale," he said. Carter, without a word, pushed through. He was gone. "Carter!" Sloane shrieked, and tried to follow him. But the turnstile had already locked again. She was trapped on the public side. My parents were pulling at her. My mother now sobbing. My father yelling my name. And then I saw him, near the main entrance. Ben Karras, the photographer. He wasn't here by accident. Alara had, no doubt, made a call. Controlled narrative. She would have called it. His lens was up. He was not photographing me. He was photographing Sloane, pregnant and screaming, pounding her fists on the security glass. He was photographing my parents, defeated and pathetic. He was capturing the long shot of Carter Hale's back, a man in a wrinkled suit, holding a cardboard box, walking out of the building he had tried to conquer. Karras lowered his camera for a moment, and his eyes met mine across the lobby. He had been there for the ambush. He was here for the execution. He was the bookend. I looked straight at him, straight down the barrel of his lens. I gave him nothing. My face was a neutral mask. My work was done. "Ms. Lane?" I turned. Maria Sanchez was holding a clipboard. "The final report," she said. "Just your signature, attesting the completion of the investigation." She slid the paper to me. Incident report. Atrium parties. M. Renford. C. Hale. S. Lane. Finding. Material breach. Fraud. Conflict of interest. Resolution. Termination with cause. I uncapped my pen. The pen I used to sign audits. The pen I used to approve compliance protocols. I signed my name. Avery Lane. Director. Ethics and Risk. The ink was black and final. I pushed the clipboard back. "It's closed." "Maria," I said. I turned and walked away, my heels clicking on the marble, the sound of my sister's rage and my mother's sobs already fading behind me. I did not go home. I did not go to the corporate apartment. I took the executive elevator to the only place in the building that offered a clean, unobstructed view, the roof. The terrace was empty. It was a space designed for summer cocktail parties, not for a Tuesday afternoon in late autumn. The wind was sharp, cold, and smelled of the city. I walked to the glass parapet. Below me, West Haven was laid out like a circuit board, a grid of logic and light, cars moving like data packets through concrete arteries. From this height, there was no chaos. There was just the system, a complex, predictable, massive spreadsheet, and I, finally, had balanced it. Every liability had been mitigated. Every bad asset had been written off. The red ink that had defined my entire life, the debt I was always told I owed, had been cleared. The ledger was clean. My personal phone vibrated in my coat pocket, a single, sharp buzz. I pulled it out. The screen lit up in the growing dusk. A text message. From Judith. It was 4 words. "Are we still family?" I stared at the question. It was not a question about love. It was not an appeal for reconciliation. It was a final, desperate probe. She was testing the perimeter. She was checking to see if the bank was truly permanently closed, or just under new management. She was asking if she still had access. I thought about the word, family, a biological data point, a fact, like any other. I typed my reply. Yes. I paused. That was the fact. It was not the truth. I added the addendum. But there are no more family discounts. I hit send. I did not wait for the delivered receipt. I did not wait for the ellipsis of her reply. I pressed the side button and held it. The screen prompted me, and I confirmed, power off. The screen went black, a perfect mirror. The wind picked up, colder now. It was strong up here. It caught the edges of the leather-bound notebook I had set on the ledge, the one I used for my personal risk assessments. The pages fluttered, a sound like dry leaves, skipping past old entries, past contingencies for hostile takeovers, past supply chain vulnerabilities. The wind stopped. The book lay open. On the top of the right-hand page, a single word I had written 2 weeks ago, when I had first stood on the glass bridge overlooking the atrium. Atrium. My pen was still in my hand. I uncapped it. Beneath that word, I wrote 2 more. Closed. I closed the notebook. The sound of the thick cover hitting the page was as final as a gavel. I looked at my reflection in the dark. Heavy glass of the rooftop door. There were no tears. I felt no rage. I felt no triumph. I felt balanced. The woman in the glass was not a wife. She was not a sister. She was not a daughter. She was not defined by the roles they had tried to assign her, the debts they had tried to stack on her. She was just Avery, alone, and for the first time in my life, entirely, completely whole. I did not need revenge. Revenge is a messy, emotional, high-cost, low-yield investment. I am a risk manager. I do not take bad bets. I had simply been presented with a system full of anomalous data, a system built on lies, fraud, and extortion. I did not set the fire. I just presented the truth, one time, in the right place, to the right people. The truth did all the work. Below me, in the Hearthline Tower, the lights on the floors were going out. The automated system, sensing the end of the workday. The 19th floor, the growth division, went dark. The 17th floor, marketing, went dark. One by one, the accounts were being shut down. I turned from the ledge, the wind at my back, and walked toward the door. The end. Thank you so much for listening to the story. I'm so curious. Where in the world are you listening from? Let me know in the comments below. And be sure to share your thoughts on Avery's final move. If you enjoyed this and want to hear more stories, please subscribe to the channel and give this video a like. And finally, you can really support the channel by hitting that hype button, so this story can be heard by more people. Thank you again.